Welcome to the Inside Circle podcast, where your host, Eldra Jackson III, and his guests get personal about prison and transformation in all of its forms.
I keep reminding myself that I've got the key, and I'm the only one who can set me free.
This is Inside Circle, where your truth will set you free.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. And I want to thank you for engaging us and being willing to stroll down this journey that has become the Inside Circle podcast. Today, we have the honor and the pleasure of having Mr. Kentric McKoy on. He is a truck driver, and the way that he describes himself is as, quote, a servant of God and man, unquote. Happy to have you today here with us, Kendrick. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm glad for the invite.
Glad for the invite. Well, why don't you, before I ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself, for full disclosure and transparency, everyone who listens to this, they're familiar with my background. They know that I spent, a little bit of time in the California system, and we happen to have done some time together. So I want to be clear about that and let folks know about that. It's good to see you, brother, on this side of the wall. Welcome home and congratulations.
And hey, it's good to be seen on this side of the wall as well.
Yeah. So why don't we start off with you telling us a little bit about yourself, where you hail from and how you got to be where you're at today?
Well, I originally grew up on the East Coast in North Carolina and Philly. So now I'll be 54, matter of fact, January 17th, this Saturday. I come to California when I was perhaps maybe like 23. So maybe like mid-90s, Sacramento area in the Bay Area. And after that, just began to, before I come to California, I already have began to go into a life of crime and going into the street life and criminology of that nature. And I took that same mindset from the East to the West. They always say the changing of your environment can be a very important and influence on change. And that is true, but unless you change the thinking, you're going to be the same person with the same behavior, no matter where you go, so, and I didn't realize that, I just thought just going from one place to the next, and I may do things a little differently, but I still had the same mindset. So that being the case, ended up being incarcerated, got a life sentence, did pretty much 26 and a half years in the California system. Now I'm in the Santa Maria area, got out, been out close to 3 years now, driving truck. I started out with 2 jobs at first before I ended up driving truck, but then in the midst of going through the transitional home, as well as having 2 jobs, I did a truck driving training. So by the grace of God, got a truck driving job with a construction company and got my own place and just, living as a civilian.
Yeah.
And trying to make my new mark and my new place in this world known as society.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. And, something that stood out to me, you spoke about, growing up and moving around a little bit. And the way that I heard it, so I'm going to use my own words is, no matter where I go, there I am, sort of mentality. And I'm hearing in there where you had kind of adopted a criminal mentality and was living that lifestyle. That's not something that just happens. How did that occur? Because I'm familiar with where you are in your life today, and we could talk ad nauseum about that. But I believe that for people to really appreciate where you are today, we got to kind of look at the journey and see, what is the making of the man? How did we get there? So how did you wind up in a place where you had adopted, a criminal mentality?
All right. One thing I was always good at sport probably from the age of 5 or 6 years old. From baseball, then to football, basketball, and everything. So at first it was just me and my mom's. and just the cousins and the things of that nature. But say maybe around 7 or 8, my father, who I never knew before, never seen a picture or anything, I met him uh, um, just by chance. My mom's and I, we was in town, and we just so happened to end up at the same grocery store. And so when I was there, she began to say, "Hey, look, it's finally that my son know who his father is." So he there with another family out and about and everything. So then that was the first time I laid eyes on him. Second time we stopped by, and he was drunk. He didn't even know I came over. And the third time I met him, he was in prison.
Mhm.
And so that was pretty much, now as a grown individual, I understand what that looks like for a lot of us as men being in prison and having a female to come visit them. Sometimes it's just all about them getting a place to stay as opposed to really being there with the family. So he got out of prison, stayed with us for a short period of time. From day one, nothing but abuse coming to the household. He already had in his mind the authoritarian, So my mom, she didn't have no problem discipline or putting a belt to my backside, anything of that nature. But he come in with a whole different mindset. One, you never come to try to know me for me as your son, know my interests and anything else, So it was a very short period introduction, where beating started, whether it was with the hands, belt bucklers, the nine, it seemed like it's the ongoing status quo. Yeah, although it shouldn't be, but however, for a lot of us in African American homes, we understood the extension cords and those things, so that came very shortly. My mom, she was a school administrator, so she began to be at work most of the time. And so he came for a little while, then was in and out of jail. So time goes on. They end up getting back together when I was 10 years old. They got married. Although my father and my mother got together and connected, him and I never did. Although he was in the household, but in actuality, he was never really present.
Mhm.
So you can have someone physically there, but the emotional presence wasn't there. Spiritual presence wasn't there. Support, the nurturing, anything, the proper guidance wasn't even there. So him and I was always at conflict with each other. And so that's growing up. And I know he used to make a statement very early on, the very first time, 8 years old, when he beat me. And he saw in my eyes, and I wouldn't cry. I just wouldn't give him the satisfaction to feel that he has broken me. And he could see it in my eyes. And he said, "Hey, look, whenever you feel that you want the chance to try me, just let me know." And those words stuck with me from the time I was 18 years old up until I was like 16, for sure. Again, I excelled in sports a lot. School academics was good. Hung around with my older cousins then, but I was still kind of on the straight and narrow, kind of a little nerdish a little bit. I just want to, everybody knew I played sports, and that was my go-to. But the more contentious that him and I relationship became, the more I started to drift away. So when I have coaches come to my house, and then he would be like, "What's this white man doing up in my house? You're not his father, I'm his father." And they begging him to let me come back and play ball, because it's just like, stop playing ball. After the beating really didn't do too much, taking away my love for sports was the go-to. And that hurted me the most.
Yeah.
The beating, yes, it had its effect and it had its trauma on me, but for taking something that I dearly, dearly love, and it was not just something I was passionate about, it was an outlet for me that I didn't really have a voice. That's where I can voice and I can let emotions out that I was suppressing. And so that being said, little by little, probably about the age 11, 12, toke on a joint with my older cousins, started that way a little bit, but still in school. Everybody else was quitting school, and I'm the only one that was steady in the course. And so as him and I get a teenager, everything's starting to be a lot more extreme
Mhm.
in the household. And he never physically put his hands on my mother, But the yelling, the grading, the verbal abuse, the emotional abuse, mentally. And I used to tell family members, I wanted him to put his hands on my mother because it would give me a justification to kill him. So I was kind of didn't want it, but did want it to happen. And so that being said, as got up in teenager, so one day I'm at the kitchen table, I'm like 16, playing sports, hitting the weights. You know how we get the kind of feeling ourselves at that particular age. And just sitting there, and then he kept going on and on and on. And first thing comes to my mind is when I was 8 years old, and those words that he continued to keep saying from the time I was 8, year after year, the whole time he was in that household. Whenever you feel the need to want to try me, just let me know. He didn't even have to say the words. It compiled. I said, you know what? Today is the day. And so I began to just push away from the table, stood up. My uncle, my mother's brother was there, my uncle. And I said, hey, I'm ready. Let's go. He seemed surprised and didn't really kind of know exactly what I was hinting at. And I said, hey, you told me when I'm ready. I said, today's the day. Let's go. So that was the first time I really, truly began to feel my voice. And, in times we were starting to get a lot more physical in the teenage years. And to the time I was 17, I just left home, stayed with my uncle and my grandfather. In 12th grade, I was just enough to get by. In the 12th grade, I ended up barely being, sports and everything else. That done went to the wayside.
Yeah.
That being said, I had my older cousins, they running the streets and doing their thing and whatever. And I always was around them, but not really running the streets. And then I decided, hey, look, let's start to hang out more in the streets than the school. And I felt accepted. I felt a place of immediately, it's like it felt comfort and it felt like the place I was supposed to be. And so from that point on, I just declared. And I remember at the age of 17, I kissed the streets, got down on my knees, kissed the streets and said, hey, look, we all one. You take care of me, I take care of you. And so beginning to have that mindset, hustled, ran the streets, got into shootouts, never officially represented any particular game to say, but as you know, hey, we always try to represent where we from. And that may be a project, a particular street, whatever. It may not really be officially a game. Back east to California, as California know it, but nonetheless, the results is pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Street life is street life. It's going to end up either death or prison, the two. And so as time goes on, got older, went to prison for the first time at 18. I had signed up for the Marine Corps, everything, wanted to get away. And I was just with the wrong people at the wrong time. Literally. Didn't know they was going to commit a crime. I was just there, got a ride to go from their ride to my car. And everything went to hell. It seemed like every dream that I wanted and everything that I did, I don't try to blame my father, but even with the advice of a father, I was going to court and they was going to give me a misdemeanor. Didn't really know nothing about felony misdemeanor, but I had my sergeant there. And he said, hey, look, misdemeanor is good. You can continue on with your military career. So no harm, no foul. Just, stay out of trouble. So my father, he began to say, hey, look, only a guilty man take a deal. You lied to me. You say you didn't do anything wrong, but you talking about taking a deal, so you lying. Only a guilty person take deals. If you didn't do nothing, you won't take a deal. Taking that bad advice, still somewhat looking for a connection with my father, that I rolled the dice and got a felony probation. So everything went, that disappeared. I held some anger. I held on a lot of anger with him. The only time that him and I really had a connection, I say probably the time I was 13, is we drunk a beer, smoke a joint together. So we more like connected if we was like partners instead of father and son. That dynamics didn't work. But if we went out and got a beer, smoke a joint, then that's the only connection that we ever had. So again, I just was that carrying that anger towards him. I take it out into the streets. And anybody that I felt to do harm to or feel someone to do harm to me, it was always his face that I saw. I remember, and it was just don't matter what the beating will come or how bad the fight will be. My thing was you would never see me cry. You would never break me. And that came from the time I was 8 years old that I declared and I vowed to myself with my father at that time. And again, so every time I go out, and so I just took that mindset, carrying the guns and stuff, coming to California, doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That, helps give, myself and those who are listening a bit of context and a little bit of the foundation, for your travels and how you wound up where you wound up. And again, we'll get to where you are today. And as I hear that, the commonality that I hear in your story, that I hear with a lot of the, people that I work with, both young and old, is the influence either that is present or is not present by strong male figures, in the lives and in the homes of our young men, and how, especially in the formative years, how impactful that is. And so just hearing your story, hear you, kind of run through some of the things that happened in your own experience really validates the truth in that matter. Not that it needs any validation, but, hearing those stories time and time again, what comes up for me is a level of sadness and commitment to continue this work. And so you mentioned, okay, now I'm in California, I'm taking this mindset into California, and, California is known as a state, you come on vacation and you're going to leave on probation. What goes on when you wind up in California?
Exactly. And I did learn that very quickly. When I come out, I think the 3 strikes law had just, and the uncle that I spoke about that was with me at the time, he was a Vietnam vet, and he really was much of like a father figure. He was the oldest uncle. He the one that spent time with me from a very, very young age. And then as time went on, before I got out here, he actually had got a job as a correction officer back east. And so he had told me, that, hey, look, man, they not playing in Cali. They just passed that law, that 3 strikes. So he said, hey, go out there and be careful. Didn't listen. I said, all right, I got you. You know how we do it. We always try to make it like we paying attention at the moment, because who they are, they kind of demand our attention for the moment. So I couldn't exactly just ignore him. I had to kind of give him that attention to say, yeah, okay, yeah, I'm listening. I got you. But then I had a relative that I grew up with that came out here and on a basketball scholarship. So he went to college at Merced for a while. Then he got into the street life, and it was just, come on out to Cali. This is what I'm doing. Hey, look, I mean, it's nothing, no different than what you're doing out here. Come on. And I said, okay, I've been into the California dream, with the palm trees and sunshine and everything else, so I brought myself out here, and again, not trying to build anything of a great foundation, having that mindset, but still not realizing more so than having a criminal mindset, but still having that suppressive anger and resentment, stuff that was boiling down beneath. I brought that out here with me because that was unresolved. That was just pressed down, and and so when I felt a particular way, or felt the anger, or felt I was slighted or betrayed, or I felt some sort of threatened, that what rises up the same way out there, and it's the same fate that I saw, at that 8 years old on the East Coast or West Coast. So that, I think, had a little bit more detrimental than, and it went along with the criminal mindset, but that was a little bit more, because yes, I know I'm in my thinking, I know I'm doing wrong. I know I'm doing dirt in my thinking, But those emotions and those things that I wasn't tapped into, that was suppressed, I wasn't used to that. And then if it did, I didn't really know how to deal with it. So I smoked another joint and drank it, wash it down with suppress it more with some alcohol or some sort of drug or substance, or put something up my nose, so it was be a distraction. And it was just a place to try to escape the feelings that I needed to address. And so that right there was a little bit more bringing out here with me that was a lot more explosive.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned emotions and not, knowing how to necessarily deal with emotions. Where did you pick up? Where did you begin to understand that? Where did you begin to get in touch and tap into and get in tune with your emotions?
Oh, it wasn't until I got incarcerated.
Say more.
And then, yeah, so once I got incarcerated, and in quite a few years of my incarceration before I really understood emotions, because emotion wasn't something that we in the household wasn't really acceptable. Um, because it always, hey, stop that crying. I'll give you something to cry for. So crying wasn't really too much of an option. And then my older cousins and them, I couldn't really cry around them or anything because that made me feel weak. I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to hang with the big fella. And, I didn't want to seem like a crybaby or anything. So I say it probably wasn't until around maybe 30 years old, probably about 5 years into my incarceration, where I was really begin to understanding emotions. Then it took a little bit more of years of turning towards that cold wall, how we do it. When we land on that bunk and we turn towards that wall, and that's when we kind of take that mask off and we kind of look, if you're on the top bunk, you kind of look down a little bit down below to see where your bunkie at, to see if it's okay, just to get that little sniffer in or whatever. And if I'm on the bottom bunk, I kind of peek up and see where my bunkie is on the top, and I roll to that wall. And that's when the more I roll and face that wall, that cold blank wall, the more the mask, I allowed the mask and start taking that mask off. And then just, cry, hey, because I did feel lonely. I did feel hurt and pain. I did feel guilt and shame. I felt those things, how much I have let down my moms and family, left a son that's out there now to grow up in the same household with my father and get the same treatment that I got. So I left him helpless. All because I was caught up into my own mess, and I wasn't getting tapped into that emotion until then. So it was probably around 30 years old I began to have a little bit more understanding, or wanted to have an understanding about what I was going through, and willing to let that out as something different other than the anger.
Yeah. And as you speak about, being 30 and getting to a place where you're willing now to let that out, or you're willing now to go in and really begin to dig off into what's there. Okay, but now you're in prison and you're serving life. So how do you begin to live from that place and that perspective?
Right.
In
And
prison,
being on the level 4s, going to
is that even safe?
rough as that was, and then going to the corcoran's, and however, regardless of my opportunity of becoming a free man, I have made it a decision that I needed to change. I needed to do something different for me. And so one, I began to get into a biblical correspondence, to get some sort of spiritual foundation, because that's what I grew up in. I grew up, kind of going to church when I was younger and things. So I wanted to build a spiritual foundation, something I can tap into, and having that spiritual awakening, that allowed me to have a little bit more emotions of empathy or understand that it was sadness was okay, because it says even anger was okay if channeled in the right way. Because I said it says be ye angry and sin not. So I didn't know how to be angry and act out. I didn't know that it was okay to be angry but not act out. So now I know that the anger part is permissible, but the behavior that comes along, the negative behavior coming along with it, is not permissible. And so, and it was just, as I seen and hear you say it time and time again, I got tired of being sick and tired. Tired of being sick and tired of just being a disappointment to my own self. And if I wasn't feeling good about who I was and who I was growing into being for the rest of my life, I know my son, my mother, nobody else is going to that person as well. So I just vowed and I said, you know what? Whether in prison or out of prison, I'm going to start living the way that I know that it was intended for me to live. The way I was pretty much raised on the right side of things, whether with my uncles or my mom, in spite of, so I just made that decision that, hey, and then as time went on, getting introduced to groups and things of that nature to help me really get a more clarity about emotions and how it's okay to express them and know and to identify them. I really, like I said at first, I didn't know how to identify it. I could tell you I'm pissed off. I'm angry. That's it. Beyond that, I couldn't tell you nothing else. Or identifying something. I know more, when my head is hurting and someone is irritating me, but I really didn't know what frustration was. I just said, well, hey, look, man, you stressing me, hey, I'm not going to be stressed out. So I'm stressed, therefore it's frustrating. I couldn't even know how to express that, let alone trying to express sadness and understand hurt, pain, the frustration and things of that nature. So just making that vow, man, that, hey, regardless of where I'm at, because it kind of go back to taking that mindset of taking me, because no matter where I go from the to the west, I still got to take me with to those places. I can't leave from being me, the core me. So now I had to have an understanding of what is the true core me of myself. And I wanted to work on that and whether it's going to be in prison or out of prison, I was going to be the authentic and have the core Kentric Devone McKoy, regardless of that, and live it to the best that I know how.
Yeah. So, and that is, especially in an environment like that, but in any environment, anywhere on the face of this planet, to make that sort of revelatory transformation, in oneself is a hell of a feat, but especially in those sorts of environments. And so how long prior to you, gaining your freedom, did that transformation begin to take place? And once that transformation took place, how long until you got out, and what did it look like getting out and coming back out into the community for you?
So doing close to 27 years, as you know, doing any double digits or let alone 20 years or better, the world changed. And so things moving fast, going into a store at times, how we do in prison, how we walk a particular way. We walk in a direction, we see each other and things, right? And so there's that peripheral. Anything when we was in prison, when we seen things coming out peripheral, moving real fast, that always meant what? Danger, right? So going into stores and that peripheral movement and the how fast it was moving, sometimes I had to just stop and just to kind of let my body know that and tell myself, you know what, I'm safe. I'm safe. This is it right here. Hey, you feeling unsafe right now. But you know what? You in the store. You in Walmart, man. You're not on the yard. You safe. You know what? I know they moving. You know what? They got a cart. They ain't got a knife. You know what? You safe. So I had to kind of get myself into that mindset to say, you are now back out into the world. Sometimes literally I stop and like they say, stop and smell the roses. I may not got a rose, but I will actually stop and touch a tree, feel a leaf, hold a tree to say, you know what? Because we was denied of touching anything of that nature inside. So that reminded me once again, you know what? You are here. You're free. And then I did had to check in. Sometimes I got overwhelmed. It was just too much for the day. That I didn't go in a particular corner and ball up and just be frozen, but nonetheless, I would get overwhelmed and say, man, that was a lot today. I mean, I mentally, emotionally, I was just drained, for 2 days or maybe weeks or months, to really to try to come out of that. But nonetheless, I think the coming from CMF, coming out of that place where there was a lot more interaction, where staff somewhat um, giving you an opportunity to be you. I think that kind of helped prepare me because they treated me before I left out like a human being. They saw me as a human being and they allowed me to see myself as a human being. So now I say, okay, well, I'm used to having
Yeah.
interaction and conversation with societal people. So it's no different than, hey, look, certain staff members that we had a real conversation, and they didn't look at me as someone in prison clothes. They looked at me as a human being. So now I can take that experience and bring it out here and say, you know what? When I go and have a conversation with whomever, someone in the store or someone who's working at a particular place, I can know I can have a conversation. Believe it or not, until I began to tell some people, a lot of them didn't even know I was incarcerated because of what they thought people coming out of prison and how they automatic have a particular look or a particular, something about them identified that, hey, look, they was locked up. One of the most stressful things, and I had to just tell them, you know what,
Yeah.
I'm just getting out of prison. That was going to the bank, going through that whole banking and working things, and then they trying to do things on the phone, and I'm and the press this, and I'm have no clue. And I just told the lady, I said, you know what, I'm gonna be straightforward. I did this amount of time in prison. I don't have a clue. I need help. And she said, don't worry about it. She said, hey, we gonna get you. And I'm still banking with them to this day, and close to 3 years later. Yeah. So that was help, having people to help me along the way.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
That that always is, a blessing, having
Mhm.
folks that understand the culture shock, and stepping into a changed world, stepping out of, a time chamber and stepping into, a new world. And so some of the work you're doing, you mentioned earlier, you're driving trucks, that's one of the things you do, but you do a little
Yes.
bit something else too, don't you? Can you speak a little bit
Again,
about that?
starting inside, I had to try to find my true purpose in life. And so that started, looking for, like, I read a book, A Man Searching for Purpose by Viktor Frankl. And so learning my true purpose, what trying to shine some light in a world of darkness in that prison system, trying to give hope where people is hopelessness in that prison system. So I had my Christian faith. And so coming out, I was able to connect with a faith, a church. And so that helped a lot too for me to come along in my transformation. Staying on that faith and building on that and strengthening that leaning on that, during the hard times and rough times and uncertainties, and just allow my gift to be seen and just to be humble in that. Now ministering as well for a church, get a chance to preach. Sometimes it be on you, have YouTube videos, also do an outreach ministry with the homelessness. How can I give back? How can I begin to see someone else's journey, not judge them for where they are at, but how did it, again, when you started out, hey, look, I know who you are now, but how did we get there? Right? So it's always a once upon a time. What is your story? And so my same thing is with them, the people I see, the homeless. I'm not concerned about. Sometimes I ask, how did you get here? Not to judge anything of that. I just want to know somebody's story as opposed to assume this is how you want to live and this is who you are and different things of that nature. But nonetheless, I want to know the person. And so, and it means a lot to them that I can look them in the eye and see them, not look past them, not turn up my nose, not walk past and do those things, but really see them for as a human being. And so I'm allowed to do those work as well.
Yeah.
So that's a passion and a purpose for me in my life. Again, so that's why I said, hey, I'm a servant of God as well as a servant of man. That's all I want to really, truly leave a great mark in this world. When it's all said and done, they say, you know what? He was a good and faithful servant.
That mic drop right there. So you mentioned here there's some links to something, you might want to
Yeah,
promote,
so
the
that's
Boys to Men support group. Can you speak a little
a
bit
group,
about that?
self-help group that I created inside. So it was pretty much, you know what, you was a great inspiration to me. And so it was a lot of like what I saw that you guys doing with Unity. And then we had started a group with the men support group with Jamal Ekaraki and them. But then I always think that generation were that generation, what they call the millennials. Sometimes it was a disconnect between our generation and the generation after us, the one that we left behind, literally left behind in this world. Like I said, my sons, my nephews, or people of that nature. And sometimes we always were like, well, hey, look, that was that 20 years of age to about 35. That's what I tried to work with. And so I know we had the men support, and most of us was older men, 40 and above, or 45 and above. But I said, but everybody was like, didn't want to deal with the younger generation. I said, well, they got to be working toward, we don't eventually grow up and get old and fade out, and somebody got to come behind us. How do we they need what we need as well. If we are suffering and we had suffered, then they suffering as well. So how do I tap into that? So created that self-help group, Boys to Men, and it literally to turn that transformation from it's not trying to disrespect or for a boy calling you a boy for his age, because you can be 25, 30, and 30, but still have a boy's mentality. And because if you immature in your thinking, you're still going to have that same results is what's going to continue to be. So, and as we got older, our generation said, hey, you know what, them youngsters, they don't want to listen. They don't want to listen. So, and I had to ask myself first, along with the men that was my generation. I said, well, have we thought about listening to them? We not the only one have something to say. They got something to say too. They want to tell their story. They got trauma. If we talk about our trauma, they got trauma too. Are we going to listen to their trauma? We only see what we see now, and same thing. They go, oh man, they just angry. But yeah, I mean, you identify that they angry, but you had to ask yourself the same thing I had to ask myself. Why was I angry? And the same question I asked myself, I asked them. You asked them why were they angry? If you had went through what they went through, you probably be angry just as well. Not sure that we're not with just that was incarcerated, my peers, but also sure that was staff. And so they understood that, and so they gave me the green light, and they helped me and supported me for creating the Boys to Men support group. And so I haven't formulated out here, but that's something that I'm working towards and would like to work towards at some point in time.
Yeah. We'll definitely be on the lookout for that. And would hope that you reach out and let us know when you get that up and running so that, we can
Okay.
find ways to support, when and where possible. Is there anything that we have not touched on today that you'd like the people to know or that you want people to take away from this experience?
To just don't give up. Don't give up on yourself and don't give up on others. We are more than our trauma. We are more than that abused child. We are more than someone who was abandoned or neglected We are more than that. And we have to believe that about ourselves, because if we believe that we are more, I've learned that I want to do more. I want to do more for myself as well as for others. And so having that understanding that I just want more people come to that conclusion that you are truly more than what people say about you, than your experience, and we can rise above. We just got to put in the work.
Yeah. Okay. So this is not a formulaic sort of place, but I do have one thing that I ask everybody if they're willing. And if you're willing, can you get comfortable in your seat where you're at? And feel your body in your chair. Feel your feet flat on the ground. And close your eyes. Take a deep breath. And on this next breath, begin to feel the years slick by, going back in the time. Back into your 40s, back into your 30s. See that 21-year-old man. See that 17-year-old Kendrick. See him when he's 16. And go all the way back until you can see that 18-year-old, that 8-year-old. And when you see him and he sees you, what piece of wisdom, what piece of love, what words would you give to him?
To don't give up on your dreams. Continue to keep pressing forward in life. Although life is going to be rough and tough at times, opposition's going to come. But I would tell that 8-year-old that you are resilient and that you will persevere in spite of. And that you are loved more than you probably realize. And that you are going to do great things in this world. Yes.
Yeah, with your eyes open, can you see that little boy?
Yes.
Can you see him looking back at you? You're doing great things in this world.
Thank you.
Keep loving you, bro, and keep doing what you do. Kentric McKoy, folks. We're going to be on the lookout for that Boys to Men program.